You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Horror Ramblings Podcast. I feel like I say that a lot. If you guys don't know about the Horror Ramblings Podcast, I just want to tell you something real quick. You're going to love it here. This show is so random. We talk about so many random things. And the wonderful thing about the show is if this is your first time listening to it, you really don't have to go back if you don't want to. Every episode's about something different. It's wonderful. But before I ramble on here, which is what we horror ramblers do, I am your host, Lester Blosser. My other host is here with me today, Mr. Stephen White. How are you doing today, Stephen?
I am doing okay. I think I got plenty of sleep, perhaps. So I think I should be well rested.
Stephen doesn't know the meaning of sleeping in, I don't think. He's a very busy guy.
I usually get up like hours ago, and today my body was just like, no, sleep. And it normally doesn't take over. No, I can usually fight it away, and I win that battle. But today it was like, no, we're gonna go back down for a little bit, and it's okay.
So would you say you're feeling a little funny today? Because I'm feeling a little funny today, the way the day's been going.
It feels like it's a little weird. Like it should. I know this is a weird thing to kind of posit, but it should be like this nice, cool fall weather outside, like the way it looks. And I opened up the door and it was just this hot, muggy, nasty feeling. And I was like, well, this is just not going to be a fun day. And maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I felt like I should have gotten a cool breeze waft in the door when I opened it this morning.
You know, I didn't. As weird as it sounds, I mean, I'm about 4 hours away from where you are. Mm-hmm. And you know, it kind of felt like fall here today, too. And I think part of it's because I'm excited for this time of year that we're getting into. Because it's wonderful. And I told you earlier, and I'll admit it to all the listeners, I'm sort of acting like a basic white girl today. I did get me some pumpkin spice from Dunkin' this morning.
Hey,
but you know what? Don't judge.
No. Anybody wants to come at me or Lester about drinking some pumpkin spice coffee or lattes, I'll fight you because I love the stuff. Okay? I don't give a damn what anyone says. It's good. If you don't like pumpkin spice, that's your business. But I love it. You give it to me on anything. Pumpkin beer, by God, I'll drink the hell out of it. I don't care.
And you know, they do a here in Ohio, they do a pumpkin festival every year, giant pumpkins, and anything you can think of made from pumpkin, they have there, and it's phenomenal. It's fantastic. I have to give a shout out here too, because just to show that you and I probably should have been friends years ago. We were talking about the best drinks of fall right before we started, and all you ramblers out there, I hope you guys like apple cider as much as Steven and I do. I mean, it's just so wonderful.
You can have it hot, you can have it cold, as long as it's done right. It's a beautiful thing.
They even have alcoholic apple cider. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Any which way you want it.
We could do a whole show on fall and all the wonderful things, you know, haunted houses and all that crazy stuff. But back to the funny feeling of the day, because today does feel kind of off, kind of like a funny little twist on how things normally are. Mm-hmm. We've kind of talked about subgenres of horror before, and we did touch on horror comedies, but I thought maybe we should do a show about horror comedy, and I mean, there's plenty that we can talk about. Don't know exactly what to talk about, but I figured we'd just wing it.
I think talking about whichever one, or the ones that really kind of captured our attention. And maybe even try to discuss what makes a horror comedy, because I think maybe someone's definition of a horror comedy may not necessarily be the same as ours. Like, I kind of have to have certain criteria to say this is a horror comedy versus a horror movie with funny bits in it. You know what I mean? Because, you've got comedy bits in Scream, but I wouldn't call them horror comedies. That's my preference, or that's my definition for the way I look at it, because comedy is not its it's not its goal per se. It's just an element of how they present the films.
And you can always talk about the fact that some film franchises start out more in the horror aspect of things and then bring in that comedy, and sometimes they do just strictly become horror comedies after a certain point. One that I tend to kind of be on the fence with is the entire Evil Dead franchise, because the original Evil Dead borders more on a horror movie. It has some comedy elements. You get into the second one, you get some more comedy. Army of Darkness, to me, is a horror comedy. Just full-fledged horror comedy. It's still a fantastic movie. I love the movie. I love everything about it. And I would still classify it under that horror genre. But yeah, I would definitely say that at that point in time, it's like a weird cross. It's like a horror comedy action movie all wrapped into one thing. So I'll give it to that. Chucky, the Chucky franchise, which we've been giving that a lot of love lately. You and Katrina gave it a lot of love on the episode that you guys did, and you made me realize some things about it that I kind of had forgotten over time. But Chucky's one of those things that it's kind of turned into a horror comedy, and for that, it really works, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what's funny about that is after we had talked about that, we actually got the 3 Shout Factory releases on 4K. They came in, and I thought, you know, go ahead and watch them because we've been talking about it. It's on our mind. And then all that did was just lead us to rewatch every Chucky because we're now halfway into the series because that's how far we got. We just said, no, let's just go. We're going to keep this going before the new season comes out, October 5th. Not a sponsor, just saying if you're into it. Because I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, the comedy, it's if you watch the films and watch it progress, because I think that was another interesting aspect of it too, is having talked about it and then immediately going back and rewatching it and seeing the progression of the character and the tone. If there was a proper horror comedy vibe, Bride of Chucky would be it. Like that is down the middle. They said it's comedy and it's horror. It's the perfect blend right down the middle. And I can't think of any element that doesn't work in that as a horror and a comedy. Then you go to Seed, and then they just kind of ramp it up to where that is, I guess, more in line to the horror comedy definition that I'm thinking of, where it's more comedy than horror, but it's still horrific. But I feel like it's a step, just a hair too far, you know? But again, it knows what it is. The franchise at that point knows what it is, and it's like, I mean, they even state at the end of the film, this is nuts. So they knew. And then obviously they've kind of woven back into horror, and then I don't know, it's like they were trying to reinvent themselves. It was like an overcorrection when they went to Curse, so it went back to more horrific elements, which I like. You know, I thought it was kind of a nice return to form. I was listening to with Gorley and Rust again, the guys I said had been talking about it. They didn't like Curse, which I was a little heartbroken about, because when I revisited it, there were things that I had forgotten. And I was like, oh yeah, you know what, this is really solid. You know, I appreciated what they were doing. It was simple, back to basics, but you still continued the story. And I appreciated that.
Well, and reinventing themselves within the movie, you know, at that point in time, people were used to a certain kind of Chucky movie. Yeah. And that kind of turned it on its head a little. So I could see why some people would go in and be like, yeah, not one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah. I haven't gotten to watch all of the series yet, but from what I've seen, you know, the one thing that should never change, in my mind at least, with the Chucky franchise, some characters just need to have one-liners. They need to have those smart little things that they say. Mm-hmm. Chucky has to have those things that he says. I mean, that makes Chucky Chucky to me, you know. Mm-hmm. Freddy Krueger could go either way. You know, I like Freddy when he has one-liners, but I like when he has the really sinister one-liners, which we've talked about on a previous show. You know, in part 4 and everything, you know, he has one-liners, but they're really dark, you know, and I think that is what makes that work. I wouldn't classify any of Nightmare on Elm Streets except for maybe the last one. Not Wes Craven's New Nightmare, but Freddy's Dead. I would maybe classify that more of a horror comedy because honestly, when they did that movie, they basically said, screw it. It's the last one we're going to do. Let's just make it freaking out there. Let's just make it as wacky as possible. And, you know, characters like Jason and Michael Myers, they don't really say much. So there's not a lot of one-liners for them. I've never really seen a lot of comedy as far as in those movies. I mean, Jason Takes Manhattan has some aspects to it that are funny.
I would say Jason X more than any of the others because it's trying to go a little bit meta, even though they're trying to stick within the confines of what the series has been, so they don't take it too far. But there are a lot more, hey, what about this? We got to do it, and all that stuff. So it's kind of poking fun, but it doesn't really lean toward a comedy. It's still more horror than comedy, but
honestly, that Jason X and Jason Takes Manhattan have two of the scenes that I've always found the funniest. In Jason X, it's the scene where he's in the simulator with the two girls, and for a minute when they pause it, the girls are, you know, they're topless and they're like flirting with him and stuff. And Jason, the way that they do the camera angle and everything, Jason goes down. And you're like, is Jason about to get freaky with these campers? And then the next clip, you know, he's beating them to death with one another in their sleeping bags. That's always been funny to me. And then in Jason Takes Manhattan, when he's walking down the road and he breaks the boombox and the guys are, you know, wanting to fight him and he just pulls his mask up and they're all like, nope. That's always been funny to me. But obviously those movies are not meant to be comedy movies. They have some comedy aspects mixed in with them.
And I think those little bits right there are things that turn people away sometimes. Like they want them to be straight horror. And I can get that, but sometimes you need a little levity. And as long as it's not taking it too far, I kind of appreciate that. You know, sometimes when it's just too much and too dour, it's a hard watch.
Well, and
you know?
This might sound morbid, but I think it adds a little bit of realism to it because honestly, obviously I've never killed anybody. Or, you know, I've only dressed up as Freddy Krueger. I've never stalked or killed anyone.
That we know of.
But I would think that there would be some comedy moments in something like that. I mean, I know that sounds really morbid, but honestly, you know, who's to say that in real life, if a killer's chasing somebody, okay, the person trips, but they get up and run off. What if the killer were to trip over the exact same thing that the victim tripped over? I mean, it's morbid, but it's kind of funny in a sense. You know, I think it adds some kind of weird realism. And yeah, sometimes they push it a little too far. Sometimes they turn characters into something just that you're not afraid of anymore.
Sure.
And that kind of kills it for me. Like, as goofy as it sounds, the original Leprechaun movie, there were a lot of people that were probably kind of freaked out by that little monster. He was funny, but they didn't push it so far that it got stupid. At least not that I remember in my mind.
Right.
But then you get into the other movies, and then it's just a bunch of ridiculousness. So I mean, I get where you're coming from with that. You know, you have to have a balance there. And yes, people expect certain things to stay a certain way. Certain horror films are supposed to be horror, which I get.
Yeah. See, even not to go back to Chucky just briefly, but as you were kind of saying that, it was just something I kind of noticed as we were rewatching. I mean, there's really not, compared to how we know Chucky today, if you really go back to the original, he's not a quippy character. He's not going around just, you know, tossing out little jokes here and there and being a smart ass. He still has that personality, but he's not that Chucky yet. And it wasn't until part 2 that you really saw it in his personality really coming through that we know.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about it too is it didn't feel out of character from what he was in part 1. It was like a natural progression. It's like, I've been here before. I'm tired of this. I'm just going to go and amp it up a little bit. And it works. And I appreciated that. So yeah, I like that nice balance, kind of like what you're talking about. If you can find, here's a great example of one or a series that was a shocker to me, but knew what it was, leans into it, and I would definitely consider horror comedy is Happy Death Day.
Yes.
That whole, like, from watching I think when the second one came out, because I didn't know what the hell it was other than a horror movie, Groundhog's Day. That's about as simple as you can put it if you wanted to simplify its premise to anyone. But when the second one came out and I started hearing stuff about it, and then people were like, it's actually really good. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a watch. And I watched both of them back to back because I enjoyed the first one. And I said, no, I'm in. Let's see what this is all about and keep going. And it is, they know how ridiculous it is. And they just said, you know what? It's comedy, but we're going to go all out in the horror department as well. So they do. And I respect the hell out of that. And I really enjoyed those two. And I really wish we'd get a third, but I don't know how that's coming about.
And to bring up something off of what you just said, speaking of Happy Death Day, they actually did it really. They did it really well, building up to it. The main character in that, she starts out afraid, trying to figure everything out, and then she reaches a point in the movie where she's just like, "Fuck it." And to me that works because to me that's so real. To me it's. You keep waking up the same day and you're like, I'm going to get murdered, and you freak out. Obviously, anybody would freak out. But then you get to the point where you're like, oh, I just get another free pass tomorrow. Fuck it, why not? And, like, even the scene where she decides to walk outside completely naked and just do a bunch of crazy shit throughout a little, like, montage that they do in it. That, to me, is just wonderful. And, yeah, Happy Death Day is one of those ones that I will definitely agree with you. That was one of those movies that I was not expecting. Kind of flew under my radar for a minute, and then I heard people talk about it, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a watch. I'm gonna see if it's any good. And, yeah, that would be classified, I think, as a great horror comedy right there.
It's because of that film, I'm keeping my eye on the writer and director of it, because he also did Freaky, which is another great horror comedy.
I was gonna bring that one up, yeah.
So he's someone on my radar that I want to continue to follow, because if that's his gimmick to make films is like mishmash two genres, I'm in. Because I know that he'd talked about another one that they were doing, and I cannot remember what the mishmash was, but I was like, sold.
If it's what I'm thinking it is, he's wanting to do basically a horror movie version of, Back to the Future. Something involving that, yeah. But, I mean, it's cheesy. The movie Freaky, just, God, fantastic. Yeah. That was one of those movies that I had seen a little bit about it, and I hadn't watched it yet. And I remember talking to you about it, and you were like, you need to watch it. It's fantastic. Yeah. And I just spent a day, and I watched it, and absolutely loved it. So, while we're on the subject here of talking about horror comedies, because I know we could just jump from one to the other, what do you think makes a movie a horror comedy? Because I know we kind of talked about that a little bit. What would you classify as a horror comedy?
Kind of jotting down a few that I wanted to kind of remember, keep it in my head. I feel that you have to acknowledge both sides of that coin. Now, obviously, if you say horror comedy, horror in this aspect would be your adjective, and I'm going to go into score mode, okay? So at the end of the day, you're saying, well, it has to be a comedy with horror in it. And I don't really feel like that's necessarily the case. There just needs to be this balance. You have to understand that you're telling a horror story, and that honestly needs to be your underpinning, but then you find a way to make it funny. That's what you need to tell, in my opinion, a great horror comedy, because you have to be writing a horror movie at its core, and then making it funny. Now, how funny you make it and how you approach it, that's different, because, like we said about Scream, it's at its core a horror movie with some comedic elements tossed in to the dialogue. It doesn't really have any comedy when it comes to the horror. Whereas in other horror comedies, I feel like you can, if it's balanced right, you can do some comedy in the actual horror with kills and things like that. So you're saying, I understand this is ridiculous, and we can do horrific deaths, but we can also do some funny stuff too, and it's not going to feel out of place. Because if you're doing, trying to think of a super serious horror film, screw it. I don't know. Let's say...
The Conjuring, maybe?
The Conjuring, yeah. If you're doing a Conjuring movie and then the ghosts suddenly come out and do some party favors and kill people with party favors, and all of a sudden they're just... and it's ridiculous when you think about it and you visualize. It's like, well, that's stupid. You know, why would the ghost do that? And it just feels completely out of place. In a horror comedy, no matter how ridiculous it is, it's going to feel out of place. So a joke or a kill can be ridiculous and it feels right. The theme of it is right. So I think that's where it could also be difficult for a filmmaker to do it right. And sometimes that's why they don't work, because the filmmakers don't know what they're trying to make, one or the other. They haven't found that balancing act.
Yeah.
And I guess this would be an example. I know I've brought this one up before as one of my favorites. And it's not a super gory horror film by any means, but Ghoulies 3, which I never hear anyone talk about, but I love it. Always have. It's a comedy at its core, more than anything, but it is a horror film because it's based off of, other two films before it. There's really no very loose connective threads, if anything, but it knew what it was going to be. It says we're going to be a horror comedy, but in the sense of Three Stooges. So everything is slapstick. Everything is cartoony. Even the way they kill people. There's a scene in there where they kill a girl in a shower using a plunger to her face and pretty much stretch it off. And I really wish they would have had the budget to go a step farther and really kind of make it gory, because then you're really playing with that idea of this is so ludicrous, look how crazy that is, and then you take it to that horror element. It's like, oh my God, that's even worse. Like you just really stepped in it in just such a way. I think that would have been funny too, but again, I'm sure certain limitations, especially in the 90s when they were like, well, you can't show gore, you can't show blood. Think of the children.
Now it's completely different.
Yeah. And even as I was talking about that one, another one came to mind. So I'm just going to have to pass it off to you until I can remember, because, oh my God, it was just like, yes, that one. And don't forget that one. And I have, like in a blink of an eye, shit.
One of those days, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But on the subject of what makes a good horror comedy, I think you summed it up perfectly, because that's my train of thought with it. The best way to create a horror comedy, in my eyes, is all about balance. It has to be balanced, because you're going to fail if you try to overcloud one genre with the other. Like you said, make a horror story, but add the comedy into it. Make it completely crazy. Make it completely out there. There's a movie, I believe it's called Red Snow, if I remember correctly. It would be considered a horror comedy in every sense of the word, if it's the movie that I'm trying to remember.
I remember now. That
go ahead.
helped me out. Return of the Living Dead, probably one of the biggest horror comedies of all time. So yeah, that would definitely be the right way to do a horror comedy, because it knew what it was going to be. It was just like, okay, well, we're playing around with the zombie genre, but we're going to make fun of it too. We're going to poke fun. We're going to just be balls to the wall crazy. The fact that zombies talk, they have plotting, like they can think somewhat. Then you have the Tar Man and brains. That's where a lot of that came from. And so, yeah, Return of the Living Dead, that was absolutely one of the best horror comedies.
Just to say real quick, I think it's hilarious in those movies, and I believe the first two of them, they had the same guys. The same two guys basically became zombies while they were still alive. And in the one movie, the one guy's even like, not again.
Yeah.
And to me, that's great. And the movie I was thinking of, it's not called Red Snow. It's called Dead Snow.
Dead Snow, yeah.
It's
I know
about
which one you were talking
It's about Nazi zombies that get woken up. They're like in Antarctica or something like that. And it's completely ludicrous. It's completely ridiculous. But it makes one hell of a fun horror comedy.
Yeah.
So I'll give it to that. What's it? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and there are bad examples of this idea not working. All right, so here's one that I feel like was not meant to be a horror comedy, because I think it could be classified as such, but it was not its intention, and therefore is a terrible, terrible, terrible movie. And it's called Cruel Jaws. I don't even know where to begin with this piece of shit. Okay, so if you're one of these people that like this movie, you're a sadist, because you just like torturing yourself. I will never watch this movie again unless certain factors have to be into play. I have to be high. I have to have people with me to torture. And then, we can make a game out of it and play so I could just watch. Because, have you ever seen this piece of shit?
I don't think so.
Okay, so
I don't think so.
I did this on a whim, all right? Because there were certain, if you dig around on like platforms like Tubi and sometimes even Amazon Prime, you can find some interesting titles. Now, I had looked up I feel like it was on Tubi. I'd looked up shark movies and stuff like that because I wanted to see if I could find one. For whatever reason, I think I had stumbled upon something shark related at one point. And I was like, you know what, this wasn't half bad. I'd like to see if maybe there's some other hidden gems out there. And then I found Psycho Jaws, I think is what it was called, or Psycho Shark. That's what it was. Psycho Shark, but it was marketed overseas as Jaws 5. Oh, God. Same with Cruel Jaws somehow. I don't understand how this is possible. Anyway, the movie had shit to do with a shark. It was an hour, a little over an hour long, which again was one of the reasons I watched it. I was like, it's an hour, I want that hour back. Because the shark was not in the movie until the very end, and then the shark was nothing more than this big CGI monster that leaps out of the water for some reason to eat one of the characters, and then that was it. The story had shit to do with the shark. I don't even know why the shark was in it. I don't even know why it was built around the shark. It had nothing to do with it. And I was just like, what did I watch? Why was this even called Psycho Jaws or Psycho Shark or whatever? None of it made any sense. Then Cruel Jaws, this, God, so I don't even know what to say about it. Someone had an idea and said, you know what? What if we could tell a story that took elements from every other Jaws movie, and we're going to get the worst actors imaginable giving their all-time best performances. Then, because we don't have a budget, we're going to rip off shots from other Jaws movies and other shark movies, and we're going to splice them into our action so it seems like we've got a budget. Because, I swear to God. Then, if that wasn't bad enough as far as copyright, there is a moment in the score as it's playing that Star Wars theme starts playing, and we're like, what is this? What? Huh? If you know the music, and everybody knows the theme to Star Wars, you hear it, and you're just like, what is going on here? What? How is this legal? And somehow they've gotten away with it. It's a terrible, terrible piece of shit, and I don't want to subject anyone to it unless I can be amused by it. So, yeah. There you go.
Wonderful.
It's like Wish version of Hulk Hogan as your main character. And this, oh my God, the story. And it even ends with one of those classic something goofy happens and then everybody's like, ha, 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 ha. And then might as well freeze frame and then cut to credits because that's exactly what it was. Just that,
oh, Lord.
Yep. So if you want to check it out, go for it, man. But just be prepared for the worst of the worst stuff.
I have to tell you about something. I haven't watched it, but you're going to have to do yourself a favor and watch the trailer. I don't think they're trying to make it a horror comedy. I think they're trying to make it a serious movie. It's on Tubi. I saw it on there. It's called Shark Side of the Moon. And the story is these people are going to the moon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their ship crashes on the moon, and they get out. They have their spacesuits on and everything. They get out. There's people on the moon that were stranded. I think they can actually breathe. They don't need suits or whatever. But they see fins moving from under the rocky surface of the moon. And there are these shark creatures that they're humanoid, but they're sharks. They're like were-sharks almost looking. I don't even know what to say about it. If the CGI was a little bit better, I might give it a watch just because the premise of it just sounded kind of out there. But the sharks do not look good. I know, but it's if you get the chance to watch the trailer on Tubi, I've not watched the movie itself yet, but it is called Shark Side of the Moon. And when I watched the trailer from it, it blew my mind. I'm like, what the actual hell am I looking at?
All right, well, let's talk about that for a minute because, yeah, you're talking about that one. And then I've seen, what's that stupid ass movie? House Shark, Avalanche Sharks, and all this other dumb.
Sand Shark, Ouija Shark.
Yeah, well, God, Ouija Shark. Jesus Christ.
There's a Ghost Shark movie.
Okay, so we're talking about movies. We're talking about movies that must know what they are because you're doing something completely ridiculous. So it feels unintentional, though, you know? They're unintentionally bad, and I feel like that's where it loses me because I'm just like, you're trying to take this seriously, and no one can take this shit seriously.
You know, I wonder when like, here's my thing. If I was handed a script and somebody was like, yeah, we signed off on this, we're getting this made, this is going to be the movie, and I read it and it was ridiculous, I would look at him and be like, are you for real? Like, this is what we're doing. Yeah. And if it was that bad, I would just own up to it, and I'd be like, you know what? If I'm going to make a bad movie, I'm going to make the best bad movie that I can. Yeah. Like, make it what it is. You know, it's just like, to bring up a movie that's not a horror movie, it's just like in the movie The Producers. They set out to make the worst show ever, and they want it to bomb. But they find a guy to play Hitler, and the guy that plays Hitler in such a way that it's entertaining. He's playing a piece of shit, but he does it so great that it's just fantastic. There was a movie that just came out. I think it was called Jojo Rabbit. Yeah, the guy that plays Hitler in it. He's the guy. He's the kid's imaginary friend. He eats meat. He smokes. Hitler was a vegetarian that thought smoking was disgusting, and he makes jokes as Hitler, but it's hilarious.
I remember seeing an interview with Taika Waititi about that, and someone was just asking, it's like, well, how do you feel about, you know, portraying Hitler in this way, in this comedic buffoonerish way? He's like, I gotta give a shit. Fuck him. You know, I'm gonna make him out to be a big buffoon. That's what I'm gonna do.
like if your movie's gonna be bad, just own it. It's like another horror comedy that I'll bring up real quick. Zombie Strippers. Most people watch that movie for the tits. Not gonna lie. That's what most people watched it for. It knows that it's not some huge, big budget Hollywood film, but it's so bad that it's good. You know, they got Robert Englund to come on and play the sleazy strip club owner, and he plays his role perfectly. He's over the top in it and everything else, and it works. Just like another horror comedy I'll bring up that he's in, 2001 Maniacs. Yeah. That movie is ridiculous. I also own that movie because I freaking love it.
Nothing
wrong.
And
Robert Englund plays the leader of everybody in this southern town. He's got an eye patch, and he's just this... He's a good old boy. That's the best way I can put it. But I'm going to tell you something. Probably one of my favorite performances of his. If he played that character just on a whim again, I would be excited for it, just because he was fantastic in it.
Sure. But
the movie knows what it is. It knows that it's goofy. It knows that it's campy. So it just rolls with it.
And I guess that's what it... Even knowing what you are sometimes just doesn't help. Like, I'm looking at this Shark Side of the Moon. Asylum film, by the way, so that explains a lot. Should have known. Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work in its favor when you're trying to be too goofy. I feel like you can also turn people away. Because, like, the Ouija shark thing, okay? So you have this puppet-ass shark... And I haven't watched it. I know I'm being biased, but I saw the trailer and that was enough for me. I was like, I'm not watching that. So
real quick, you just looked up Shark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
Did you see the sharks?
Yeah, I did. That is a god-awful looking creation.
If they would have changed them just a little bit and the CGI was better, they'd probably look kind of cool. Yeah. Honestly.
Maybe.
The first thing that I thought of, there used to be a show, I think it was on in the 80s or the 90s. It was about sharks that rode motorcycles.
Oh, Street Sharks.
Cartoon? Yeah, Street Sharks. I instantly thought that's probably what the Street Sharks would have looked like back in the 90s if they would have made a movie with CGI back in the 90s.
True, yeah.
That's instantly what I thought.
That's on point.
But here we are talking about bad movies. I want to bring up a classic. And this one, and I'll see if you can guess it, it's a horror comedy, but it's also a musical.
I would probably lean into maybe a Little Shop of Horrors.
You are right on the money.
Yeah, that's one of my all-time favorites.
You and me both. Let's talk about that, because that has all of the aspects, I think, that make a good horror comedy,
Yeah.
and it's got a bonus thing in it that the world needs more of. Rick Moranis.
Sure.
For those listeners out there who don't know who Rick Moranis is,
How dare you?
I just have to say you're living under a rock, people. He's been in so many fantastic movies, and he fell off the radar. You know why he quit Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I'd heard his wife was sick, and I think she passed at some point.
His wife passed away from cancer, and he knew that if he kept working, he couldn't be the best father that he could be. So he quit Hollywood, and he took care of his kids. And I will give him credit for that all day.
Certainly,
but I mean, he was in Ghostbusters, Little Shop of Horrors. Anything that you've seen Bill Murray in, he's probably been in just about. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah.
He's just a fantastic actor, and he can sing. He can sing. Little Shop of Horrors proves that. Let's talk about Little Shop of Horrors. It's a musical where an alien plant infiltrates our world, and Seymour is Rick Moranis' character. The plant starts at first by drinking Seymour's blood, and as the plant grows, it needs to eat meat. And so Seymour has to commit murder to feed this giant plant that at the end of the movie, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, tries to kill him. It's
depending on which version you watch.
Yeah, there's two versions of it. And one thing that I love about the movie, Steve Martin.
Oh God,
he's such a terrible character in it, but I love him in it, and I love his song. His dentist song. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's one of those that if I hear, I'm gonna start singing along because I love it so much.
And for people that don't know, the movie is on Tubi. It's free to watch on Tubi. Yes, it has ads, but it doesn't take away from the movie.
No, this film is a classic. I mean, bar none, absolute classic. You cannot go wrong here. You have, like you said, it's a perfect blend, honestly, because on the outside it's going to look like a comedy because you have Rick Moranis, Steve Martin, Bill Murray, for that matter. He's in there.
He is, yeah.
John Candy, Jim Belushi.
Yeah, John Candy.
They're both in there. Christopher Guest. I mean, there's a lot of comedic actors involved.
Yes.
But at its core, it really is a horror film. And depending on how you... All right, so let's talk about this. Spoilers if you haven't seen it, because I do want to touch on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Between the two endings, because there were two endings that were shot. The ending that we do not see in the original or in the final theatrical cut was the second ending shot. And then the original ending, it plays out everything differently. And I feel like it was a good choice to reshoot it, in my opinion. As fascinating as the original ending is, and I do enjoy checking out at times, I don't feel like the film justifies killing Seymour and Audrey. Simply because if you watch the film, Seymour never once kills a soul. Every death was not his fault. So therefore, punishing him for killing when he does no killing felt wrong. Therefore, he and Audrey do deserve a happy ending. Now, had he been going out there doing the murders and being the killer, sure, then it's justified. But he never kills anyone. Therefore, them dying and not getting a happy ending is unfair. So, and I'm very particular about that too when I try to justify things. I think I even said in the Child's Play episode with Katrina, I'll only take the death of a child if it serves a purpose. If you're just killing kids just to kill kids, then no, I don't want to see that. But if you can give me a reason that it serves a purpose, like Jaws, like Assault on Precinct 13, there's a reason. I'm okay. I'll give it a pass. I'm like, yeah, sure, you kill the kid because it's serving a purpose to the grander story. So, yeah.
Now, in the one ending for the movie, the plants win.
Yes, that's the original ending that was... I think it was actually the stage play ending. But audiences did not react to it appropriately. They were like, no, I don't like that. And again, it's understandable. You watch this entire film, and there's never a moment that you're not rooting for Seymour.
And I'm trying to remember, Audrey's boyfriend, Steve Martin's character, doesn't he get like high on gas or something at the dentist office? Doesn't that lead to his death,
and then,
if I remember right?
It was just, a happy accident. Like he was going to shoot him, like he had the gun, he was ready, and then he just OD'd on his little laughing gas, and it was like, all right, well. So again, not Seymour's fault.
And the only thing Seymour does is he hacks the people up when they die.
Yeah. And
basically.
You know what? That could be considered. People like, well, that's a step too far. Yeah, but it's serving. He's trying to get the plant off his back. I mean, I'm sure Audrey could have easily swallowed him whole, but wanted her dinner chopped up and served in pieces.
But yeah, and let's be honest, you know, Audrey 2, which is the plant. Audrey 2 is a smart ass, has one hell of a singing voice.
Oh yeah.
It just you watch the movie and you like for me, what I enjoyed about it is you're listening to the music, you're having a good time, it's making you laugh. You know, one of my favorite parts is when Steve Martin's character is spraying the water in the guy's mouth, and he's like, "Say ah!" and he keeps getting louder, and the guy's just screaming. I love that part. But you hear all the songs and everything, and then they stop singing, and you just get put back into the scene so quickly. Whether it's, you know, in the beginning of the movie, it's really depressing because they live in a terrible part of the town, and their lives suck, and you feel bad for them. But this movie's great. I think the music is what adds to it. And maybe this is something else about a horror comedy that I could say. In between the funny moments, or in between the music in this case, it's like you get snapped back to the reality of what is happening in the movie. And that's heavy when you're watching a movie. Especially in this movie. Like, I remember laughing, having a good time when they're singing, and then it cuts right back to where they're just talking. And I'm just like, God, I forgot how bad these people have it. But it makes the movie work. And honestly, if any of the Ramblers out there have not seen it, it's free on Tubi. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Give it a watch. You will love it. You will love it.
It's an easy recommendation to make because it's so good. I can't think of a reason, even if you, because I know people say, well, I don't really care for musicals. I'm not, I don't go out of my way to watch musicals, but I do have some musicals that I just, bar none, I love and will watch at any point in time. You know, so, and this is definitely one of them. Like, this is high on my musical, if not one of my top, if not the top favorite I have. And we need more horror musicals, do we not? I mean, now that talking about
I agree with you.
That would be...
What is the one... What is the one that's they did a musical of it? They harvest organs in the movie. You know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah. I'm blanking. There's a Rambler out there screaming at us.
I know, and I cannot think of the name of it. It'll come to us at the most random moment. I do have a random question since you said you do like certain musicals.
Sure.
Now, I love the original producers, and it's a guilty pleasure of mine, but I actually really like the remake that they did of it.
Yeah, with
Nathan Lane?
Nathan Lane.
Now, did you like that one? What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with it. I thought it was solid. I mean, it's a little hard to kind of go a step up from Gene Wilder, you know,
well, of course.
and Zero Mostel, but no, I mean, I thought they did fine because I mean, I love Nathan Lane. I mean, dude's just hilarious in anything he's in.
How can you not love Nathan Lane? Really,
he's a gem. And I mean, I don't have a problem with Matthew Broderick. Everyone tries to stereotype him as nothing more than Ferris Bueller, and anytime he's in anything else, it's like, well, Ferris Bueller's fighting Godzilla. That's stupid. It's like, shut up.
Well, Ferris Bueller was also Simba, so let's not be hateful here, people.
Exactly. But that's,
speaking of,
that's racist now because it should have been a black. Okay.
Yeah.
We got it. Sorry.
Speaking of, because I was going to go one direction, but I just thought of something. Speaking of the late, great Gene Wilder, I have another horror comedy that I think would border more on comedy, but I want to tell you something that I'm sure you already know. Let's talk about Son of Frankenstein. But I want to tell you about one scene, and I don't know if you know this or not. So the scene where they sing Putting on the Ritz, I don't know if you knew this or not, that was originally not in the movie. Mel Brooks had no interest in that. Gene Wilder is actually the one that pitched that scene. And Mel Brooks said to him, well, I don't really know about that. And he told Gene Wilder, he said, I'll tell you what, if you feel the same way about it in the morning, come talk to me. And Gene Wilder went and talked to him. They kind of had a little, wasn't really much of a spat. And Gene Wilder was like, I think it'll work. I think it'll be great. And he's like, you know what? If you think it'll be great, let's do it. And to me, that's one of the most memorable parts in that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think even to that point, it came down to Mel Brooks saying, if someone is that passionate about something, then yeah, there's got to be something there. So that's why he went with it. He's like, he wanted to see that he was very passionate about it. And like you said, it's one of the more memorable scenes in the film. So, yeah.
And honestly, I would put it more on, and maybe it's just because, it was a parody of Frankenstein, and I consider it more of a comedy than a horror, but you could still classify it as a horror comedy.
Yeah.
Just so many aspects of that film, I think, work. All of the just over-the-top goofiness, and this is a different kind of comedy. A lot of people might not get it. It's more of a classic comedy, I would consider, compared to some of the stuff that people find funny in movies now. But even the most subtle things that you find out, to me, this movie is funny not just because of the movie itself. It's because of all the things that you find out all these years after about the movie. Like when Gene Wilder would when he would look at Igor, and he would kind of look at his hump and wonder for a minute. The guy that played Igor would move the hump on each side in between takes to confuse everybody, to throw them off. So that was genuine.
Yeah.
All the lines that they just kind of came up with out of nowhere. If I remember right, I don't know how true this is, but if I remember right, I had read somewhere that, when he was going, it's not Frankenstein, it's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I believe that they actually had just come up with the part randomly when he was like, it's not Igor, it's Igor. I believe that was, put in. But it's, to me, it's like classic slapstick comedy. And it's just a fun movie to watch. If you can get past the thought of it being in black and white, which that bothered some people, and they did that on purpose, but I don't see the point in being mad about it.
Some people have this aversion to lack of color, which I don't want to say I don't understand. I get it, because I too have been that way as a young man, as a boy. I was very adamant about color, but at some point you find films that you enjoy in black and white, and it makes it easier to just get past. Because I get it, there's something about, you want to see the bright, beautiful colors and yada yada, but there's always good movies in black and white. You just because it doesn't have color doesn't mean it's not a solid movie. I can name you quite a few solid black and white films, but if you want to deprive yourself of good cinema, then that's on you. Yeah. I mean, color does not make a good movie. It's just part of it, or it can be part of it, or it can't.
Yeah. And so, on another note, real quick, I'm going to kind of come full circle here, but I want to give a shout out to Mel Brooks. We wouldn't have all the fantastic movies we have. I mean, Mel Brooks also created The Producers, Son of Frankenstein.
Are you saying
Spaceballs?
Son of Frankenstein?
Is that what it is? I don't know why I always say Son of Frankenstein. You know what I meant.
Yeah, I was wanting to make sure, because I was like, did I hear Son or Young?
I've always called it Son of Frankenstein. So it's a fun little fact about me. When I was a little kid and I first saw the movie at the video store, we'd gone to a Blockbuster and they had it there for rent. And I called it Son of Frankenstein as a little kid. And even to this day, I still call it that for some reason. So,
I mean, there is a Son of Frankenstein, but we want to make sure we're on the right page.
Young Frankenstein. Forgive me, Ramblers. It just something from when I was a kid that's still just in the mind.
Yeah, I get it.
But so Mel Brooks gave us all these fantastic things. Mel Brooks is still kicking. He's in his 90s. He's still hilarious as ever. And I just want to give a shout out, because I want to come back to this, because I thought this would be fun to come back full circle. Not necessarily horror related, but another gem of his that Rick Moranis is in, Spaceballs, which has one of my favorite lines, one of my favorite scenes of any movie of all time. It's in my top 10. It is when Rick Moranis is in the ship, and he goes, "What's your name?" And he goes, "He's an asshole." And the guy's last name is Asshole. And he goes, "How many assholes we got on this ship?" And everybody stands up, and he goes, "I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes." Favorite line in the movie. That whole scene is just fantastic.
Hey, and you know what? You're going around to Mel Brooks. I mean, he's not that far removed from horror, if you think about it.
Yeah, we've talked about him before.
That's right. He did produce The Fly, so. Yep.
He also did another movie I would consider a horror comedy, but maybe more so a comedy with some horror aspects, with one of my favorite actors of all time, and I'm so sad that he's gone, because he's been in a lot of horror comedies. He even joined the Scary Movie series at one point as the president. Mr. Leslie Nielsen,
yeah.
Dracula, Dead and Loving It. And it's just, I'm sure that's probably on, at least I hope that's on a list of movies that you enjoy because it's just so ridiculous.
He's definitely one of those, like, I like the Naked Gun films are probably the ones he's best known for, and they're absolutely favorites of mine. I had not noticed a difference in the tone of each one or the comedy per se, because if you go back and you watch the original and then say watch the third one, there's a different way they approach the comedy. And I know why the original is so beloved versus some like the third one. And it's this misunderstanding of the comedy. The comedy, they're just like, well, just be silly and goofy and crazy, and let's just throw it all in there. The first one, they take everything straight. Everything is played as straight as you could be, and that's where the comedy comes in, out of the ludicrousness of how straight they're playing it, very much like Airplane.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, you do not turn it goofy. You don't try to be goofy. You play every scene as straight as possible and allow the comedy to come naturally through how ludicrous everything is. And once I realized that's what was going on and why part 2 and part 3 of Naked Gun, it's because they just said, just be goofy, be crazy, just do whatever. And that takes away from the beauty of how they're approaching it in the first one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, comedy he was a gem, and I do miss him a lot.
What did you think of Dracula Dead and Loving It? I'm sure you've seen it.
It's been a while, honestly. I think I would have to rewatch it to kind of give a proper observation of it, because I can't remember the last time I watched it. I won't say it's been super long, but it's been a while. I'd say it's been a couple of years.
You'll have to do yourself a favor and watch it, because he does bring back that, like, I'm going to be straightforward. I mean, he's campy, but he acts like he's kind of eccentric because he's Dracula. But, I mean, Mel Brooks even plays Van Helsing in it. Yeah. And there's a scene in it. I know I keep bringing up scenes of movies, but just funny things that I remember. One of my favorite scenes in that movie, it's when the first woman is turned into a vampire, and they're at the mausoleum. And Van Helsing tells her that tells the gentleman, he says, we have to stake her through the heart. Well, he gives him the stake, and he tells him to do it, and he steps off to the side where he's shielded. Well, he stakes her through the heart, and all this blood just pours up all over him. And he's like, oh God, there's so much blood. And Mel Brooks comes out, and he's like, well, what do you expect? She just ate. And he's like, she's not dead yet. You have to do it again. And he's like, and he's kind of hesitating, and Mel Brooks goes, how much more blood could she possibly have? He does it again, and just more blood just all over. Well, Mel Brooks comes out again, and he's like, she's almost dead. And he looks at him, and he throws the hammer, and he goes, she's dead enough. It's just, it's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's to be expected from Leslie Nielsen.
Sure.
And it's just, even the guy that they picked to play Renfield, which the guy that plays Renfield in that is also in the second Ghostbusters.
Who was that?
I'd have to look him up, but he plays the he works at the museum. He's like the boss at the museum, and he's the one that gets possessed by the painting.
Oh, Peter McNichol.
Yes, him.
Yeah.
And he plays Renfield, and he's over the top. If I remember right, he's the one that played Renfield. I believe I'm correct.
Double check that, because I forgot he was in
I might be wrong.
Because there was another name that was coming into my head.
I very well could be wrong. Maybe it's just because they look alike.
No, he was in it. He was Renfield.
Okay, but it's just even his lines. There's a line where he's in the bedroom of one of the girls, and he's taking the garlic down, and he's looking under her dress, and he's like making all this noise, and they grab him out, and he's like, I didn't see anything, and they put him in the room, and then he looks at the camera, and he goes, I saw everything. And they keep threatening to give him an enema as his treatment in the whole movie, and it's just, that's another one of those horror movies that I wouldn't even consider it a horror movie. It is a comedy based off of a horror movie. Is the best way to put it. But here I am rambling on. Steven, I want you to talk about any movie you want, man. Because
see, I was trying to find like this middle ground, trying to find something that maybe I haven't talked about before, because I know I've gushed about Psycho Goreman. That's a horror comedy of the highest order. I would highly recommend that to anyone. That, to me, that's a good example of a horror comedy. Something that can go horror and really plays on the comedy at the same time. Knows exactly what it is not afraid to go one way or the other.
Now, I know one that we talked about on the episode where we talked about subgenres. Mm-hmm. We talked about it a little bit. It's an oldie. I mean, not real old, but one that I'm sure that you would really enjoy, or I know you've seen it, but you would really probably enjoy to talk about. Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead, yeah, that's another solid one. That one, oh boy, because this one kind of threw me for a loop the very first time I saw it, because it did kind of have this teetering line of being comedy with horror elements, and then they kind of took it. I mean, if you really look at the ending of that, it really goes dark. Yes. Like the tone shifts and you kind of feel it and it's like, oh, okay, everything's kind of getting a little serious now. And it was a little jarring to me, but I can respect it because it's leaning into the more horror aspect as opposed to going the comedy aspect. And I think that's what a lot of them do, is they'll go, well, let's go to the comedy route for the ending versus the horror route. And they just kind of subverted that. They said, well, no, let's go the other way. Let's see how that goes. And I think we want it to go the comedic route because we've kind of been there the whole time. Mm-hmm. But it actually makes more sense to go the horror route. So I respect that. I respect what they did. I do say that it can be very jarring. But no, it's a solid choice. And I respect it for doing that and not going the normal route and doing something subversive. So, yeah, I highly recommend that.
Have you ever seen Willy's Wonderland? I
have. I finally broke down and watched it. I know people
What did you think of that?
That is, I mean, it's balls to the wall crazy. That's for sure. Like, it should have been something to the effect of Five Nights at Freddy's, because that's what it's trying to emulate to some degree. And Nicolas Cage, he's at least quiet for most of the movie. He's very subdued, but then he goes and amps it up when he needs to, and then goes back down to being a nobody. He's a bizarre character. I don't even know what to say about it. It's out there for sure. It's definitely a horror comedy of the insane order.
I watched that maybe 2 months ago, I think. And yeah, I just Nick Cage is not just a character in the movies; he's a character in real life.
Oh yeah.
I'm just wondering if that's really just how he is on a typical day.
I'm starting to wonder. I mean, it's just
I do love in the movie, no matter what was going on at the time, even when other people were in danger, when it was his break time, he went ahead and took his break.
Yeah, it was just like no.
I thought that was pretty hilarious. But God, now there's a movie I was trying to think of, because I was thinking about Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Yeah,
I was thinking about that a lot. Mm-hmm. The one guy in that is in another movie. I think it's called like Cabin Country or something of that nature. Okay. And I watched that a while ago. And him and his girlfriend are going to like a cabin that the family owns. And she wants everything to be perfect because she knows he's going to propose. Mm. And his brother comes, and him and his brother get into it, and he loses his temper, and he delivers an axe blow to his brother's neck. And then a killing spree begins because they just want everything to be perfect. And his now fiance wants everything to be perfect, and she's like, oh, just one more. These are the last people we'll kill. These are the last people we'll kill. And the movie kind of goes through everything, and it is a comedy. But I would honestly put it like a psychological thing, because she goes nuts. And the ending of it, like, I love a good comedy, but this one kind of follows the Shaun of the Dead thing, but in a much worse way. At the end of the movie, it's a downer. Like, I don't want to ruin it for you, because if you decide to watch it.
Yeah, I would definitely like to check it out.
The ending of it, just like, even when I think about the ending, like, you feel bad for the character at the end.
Sure.
So, but I would put that in that category. And I apologize. I feel like I've just been rambling on about stuff today, Steven.
No, I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting all this down. I'm trying to see if I can find out what that's called. Now, do you remember which of the two actors? Was it
It was the
Alan
gentleman with the
Tudyk
beard.
okay, so Tyler Labine. Let's see. I know, he's an actor that, I don't know if you remember this show. I mean, while we're talking about horror comedies, this could be classified as such.
Cottage country.
Country.
Sorry, not cabin country. Cottage country.
No.
But as you were saying, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I first noticed him in a show that lasted maybe like 2 seasons on the CW called Reaper. And it was
I remember that
show that it had so much potential, and I hated they canceled it. It might have been 3 seasons, matter of fact. I don't remember, but yeah, it was a show about, for those that might not be or know what it is or be aware of it, there was a guy who found out that his soul had been sold to Satan by his parents. So when he turned 18, I think it was, he had to start doing jobs for the devil. So the devil would come to him with bounties and things like that. You got to bring this demon back to hell who escaped and yada yada. And one of his buddies was Tyler Labine. He went by the name Sock in the show. And he was the highlight to me. He was always the comic relief, the one that was just always like on point with something to say. And it was an other solid cast too. Hell, the guy that played the devil, I'm going to remember his name, Ray Wise. Absolute, just knocked it out of the park. Like, I loved him in that role. He needed to be more sinister characters like that in his career because he nailed that. Like, you just wanted to see more of the devil because of him. So yeah, that was a show that got canceled way too early. I feel like, but yeah, he was solid.
Speaking of the devil, just a side note, I will agree with a lot of people. The version of the devil that we got in Constantine, probably one of the best versions of the devil I've ever seen in a movie. I don't know how you feel on that, but I had seen that somewhere, and he doesn't have that much screen time, but I remember him so well from that movie. But on a random note. But yes, that movie is called Cottage Country, and if you get the chance to watch it, it is free on Amazon Prime, so you can watch it without commercials or anything. And like I said, it's
a lot.
I think he had a little bit to do with it, but I also think he had a little bit to do with Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I think they kind of helped with I don't think they like wrote the whole thing, but I think they did help with a little bit of that.
Sure.
What other horror comedies would you like to shout out? Maybe.
I'm really trying. Okay, here's one that's all right. Yeah, I'll go this route because I don't know if you've ever heard of this film. This one was one that kind of eluded me for some time, but I remember when I heard about it, I was like, oh, I want to check this one out. And this one may be tame in comparison because I don't think it's an R-rated feature, but in any case, it's fine. There was a movie called Final Girls, which had a few familiar faces. There's 2 movies that almost have the same title, but this one has, can't remember her name. She was in Watchmen and some other stuff. I know that it really helps. Damn it. Come on, brain. I know you know the thing. And
oh, yeah.
And the problem is there's
not
so
Olivia
many
Munn,
other...
is it?
No.
She reminds me of her
Malin,
for some reason, though.
Malin Ackerman and Taissa Farmiga. Taissa Farmiga,
Yes,
she was in
yes.
American Horror Story.
Yep.
Stuff like that.
Fun fact, her sister is the woman that plays Lorraine Warren in The Conjuring.
That's
A lot
right.
of people don't know that, but yep.
Yeah, I thought, and not to say that her sister, what's her name? Vera Farmiga. Yeah. Wow, I pulled that one pretty quick. Like, not to say that she's older or like looks older, but there just seemed to be like this mother-daughter thing between them.
Yes.
And I never would have thought sisters for some reason because the other one, Taissa, looks so much younger. And again, not to say that Vera looks old. I don't think that at all. It's just, but you see what I'm saying.
They have a pretty big family, I believe, though. So
there was like a, 15, 28 year age difference?
Something like that. I think there's like 9 siblings, though, or something crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Final Girls. I have not seen it.
Okay, yeah, this one was hard to find for whatever reason. Like, I remember seeing a trailer for it, and I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool, because it seems like it's paying homage to the slashers from the 80s. And, I mean, you take a look at the cast, I mean, you've got a lot of interesting comedic actors, so it seemed like a comedy or a horror comedy of the the right order, because you're getting comedic actors, but you're also kind of paying homage to that. Like I said, I feel like it was PG-13, but I'm almost remembering some gore in it. So maybe I'm mistaking it. I can't remember. But anyway, no, I finally found it. I think it was $5 on Vudu or something like that. They were having a sale, and I thought, you know what? I've been wanting to see this. Plop down $5. If nothing else, if it happens to suck, then it won't be that much of a waste of $5 or a waste of money in general. I really enjoyed it because the concept, it's a little, like, I appreciate what they're trying to do with it, and I guess getting there is the only issue I have with the film, because it's about trying to take this girl and put her in her mother's shoes as an actor or an actress back in apparently her mother used to be a horror movie actress or something like that, or was in the slasher movie that everybody knows. And she gets pulled into the movie, and then now she is playing, or she is her mom, or she gets to interact with her mom within the confines of what this movie was. So it's not like she remembers who she is. I know I'm making it sound more complicated than it needs to be, but it's the concept of kind of like Back to the Future, but with this last action hero twist of going into the movie and then getting to interact with your parent as a younger person.
Yeah.
And then obviously having to deal with the film itself, because you're still in a slasher.
Yeah, being in real danger. Yeah.
Right. So who's going to be the final girl? And that's what it kind of boils down to. It's a fun movie, the fun concept. Like I said, a little odd getting to the point you're trying to make, but kind of like what Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis said about Back to the Future, the time machine is just a means to an end. We didn't want that to be the focus of the story. The story is about Marty meeting his parents. Yeah. To hell with the time machine. We just wanted to tell this story, but everybody got caught up about the time machine. Yeah. So same with this. If you can just kind of overlook how you get there, the idea and the premise of what you're doing once you get there is fun. And I'd kind of like to see a few more takes on that, about what is it knowing about a horror movie and all the tropes, and now you're living in it, because it's not like Scream, you know what I mean? Like Scream, you're like, oh, well, I've got horror movie knowledge, but this, you're actually in one of these type slasher movies. So this killer's kind of Jason-esque, especially being in the summer camp and all that. So you have to have that mindset. So it was an interesting take.
I'm gonna have to check it out. It's like $3 now to get. See? I might have to.
And I'd say worth it,
Yeah, I love when there's just movies that kind of fly under the radar. I've got one. It was a Hulu movie. It came out in 2019. Not to be confused with the other movie. There's another movie that came out way before. Little Monsters. It came out in 2019.
That's the one I've been wanting to watch.
They go on it's a field trip, and while they're on the field trip, a zombie outbreak happens. It's about all I can say. It's a comedy movie. Yeah. The teacher in the movie, she deserves Teacher of the Year. She really does. There is a scene with a little hand puppet. The puppeteer becomes a zombie, and the puppet becomes a zombie, and the puppet attacks someone. I won't really say a whole lot about it because I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it. It's on Hulu. It's a Hulu exclusive. It was a hilarious movie, and it's really heartfelt. It's a teacher surviving a zombie apocalypse with a bunch of little kids.
That actually made me remember another one very much like it, Cooties, with Elijah Wood.
Cooties, yes. Yeah. Cooties.
That's another one I would highly recommend. That was a fun one.
I love, there's a scene in that movie where they think they're safe. They go inside, and they're in a play zone, and there's all the kids in there. Oh, man. That's another fantastic movie.
Yeah.
And to bring it back to something real quick, because we were just talking about Nick Cage just a short bit ago. Mom and Dad. Have you seen that?
Can't say that I have.
Mom and Dad is a movie that was created by people thinking, what would happen if something caused parents to hurt their children, like kill their kids? You know, a parent's goal in life is to protect their children. And this movie turns that on its head. There's, like, static comes on the TV, and when it happens, the parents lose their shit. and they try to kill their kids. Like, it's really just weird. But Nick Cage is in it. It's got a pretty good cast in it. Let me see if I can. We're only human. We have to look stuff up, people, just so you know. It came out in 2017. They just classified it as a horror movie, but I think it has some comedy aspects to it just because Nick Cage is a psycho and in the best of ways. So Nicolas Cage and Selma Blair are the parents in it, and they try to off their children. A scene of it that I absolutely love is at the beginning of the movie, Nick Cage is talking to his wife, and she says, "Honey, don't forget, your parents are coming over for dinner tonight." Well, there's a part in the movie where he's about to off one of the kids, and there's a knock at the door, or the doorbell goes off or whatever, and she's like, "Honey, dinner with your parents, remember?" He's like, "Oh, shit." Well, they open the door, and Nick Cage's parents start trying to kill him. And you'll get a kick out of this. Guess who plays his father? None other than Lance Henriksen.
Nice.
It is a fun movie. It's not very long. I think it's... I don't think it's very long. I think it's a little over an hour. It's an hour and 26 minutes. So if you ever get the chance to watch it, it's on like Stars. That's another one of those movies. They try to just sell it as a horror movie, but again, it has that balance that makes it perfect. But that's definitely another one of those. I don't know any upcoming horror comedies. I know they're talking about doing another Psycho Goreman, and I'm all for that, completely for that. That was one of those movies I am so glad that you were like, you haven't watched it yet, you need to watch it, because wow.
Solid.
Super solid. But I can't think of any other horror comedies off the top of my head. I know you had a few that you had been thinking of. Do you have another one that you'd like to bring up, or?
No, because I wrote down two others. No, I want to save them for something else. I feel like I want to talk about them separately with another topic I've been thinking of. Obviously, Texas Chainsaw 2. I've mentioned that one several times.
Yes.
I'm not going to go into great detail. Great horror comedy. Definitely jarring, but that's a horror comedy in all the right ways.
And being over the top in certain areas really works for that film.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's about the rest of, or the end of my list.
Like I said, I can't think of anything else that really jumps off the noggin right now that I want to shout from the rooftop. I'm sure that there's some horror comedies that we've maybe never seen or haven't brought up. That might be something to discuss with the Ramblers out there. See what they might be thinking as far as horror comedy goes.
For sure.
But if that's all you've got and all I've got, then if you want to tell those wonderful Ramblers out there where they can drop us a line, send us a message, maybe send some threatening letters or something, I don't know, whatever they want to do.
Yeah, whatever they want to do. Let us know how you feel about this topic today. What is your favorite horror comedy? Is there one that we didn't mention? What's one you love? What's one you hate? Whatever it is, you can tell us on Twitter at horrorramblings. And if you've got more to say in a tweet, just not going to cut it, you can send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com. And if you love social media groups, follow us on Facebook, join our Facebook group, and hang out with fellow horror fans like yourself. You can tell us all about the horror comedies over there, too. You can start your own thread. You know, we need more people to start chiming in and saying stuff. You can even find us on Instagram to see an assortment of horror images that we may or may not post on a regular basis. We'll see. Maybe if you're feeling generous and you want to support the show financially, you can head over to patreon.com/pencilandpaperproductions to chuck in a buck and help this and other shows like it grow. And if I can think about it, for crying out loud, you know, we can do merch over there and stuff like that. I don't have a lot of tiers going on the Patreon right now because I don't have a lot of people doing things. But if more people did the Patreon thing, then I would have more incentive. And I know I'm supposed to be incentivizing you but you understand where I'm coming from. I'm not going to put in the work if no one's going to do it. And I will put in the work if you do it.
We've got plenty of ideas for things to do with all you Ramblers out there. We just need to hear from you guys. That's all.
Yeah. If you want to say nice things about the show, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us one of those beautiful 5-star reviews to help the show grow. You can express your feelings and all that jazz, and you can do the very same thing on Spotify if you're so inclined. You can even answer the questions that we post on Spotify, and you can vote on the polls if we have a poll up for some reason. Because sometimes I don't add a poll because I can't think of what we could do that would be related to the episode, but if I do, check it out. Vote. And they're always up for a week. So you have to kind of get within the time frame of the week in which we posted, that kind of thing. But anyway, it's all appreciated. And most importantly, you can tell your fellow horror fiends to search Horror Ramblings on the preferred podcasting platform. And if we're not there yet, we're working on it. But if nothing else, keep up with any and all things Pencil and Paper Productions. patreon.com/horror-ramblings. Links are in the show notes for your convenience.
And remember, guys, stay funny and spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.